Hello, this is Praveen. Welcome to .NETgurukul.com. Today is session 3, C Sharp training. So in this particular session 3, here are the agenda items on .NET evolution and versions. So we'll see what are the different framework versions we have, and we'll go through the different versions in terms of the framework and .NET Core. So we'll see all the versions, and also like in the C Sharp versions, and we'll highlight the features, high level overview on the C Sharp versions and the features it holds, and also the Visual Studio versions and .NET compatibility, and also we'll demo through the .NET standards with respect to our previous discussion on .NET standards as well. So with respect to our previous sessions, like you might be aware on the .NET terminologies, like whatever the terminologies have we like in terms of .NET Framework, .NET Core, and .NET ASP.NET, ASP.NET MVC, ASP.NET Core MVC, and Razor pages, and all this stuff like VB.NET, C#.NET, and everything. Like you might have some terminology idea with respect to the previous sessions. Now let we get into the drive with respect to the frameworks versions. Okay, so if you can see the Visual Studio release and the subsequent releases in this particular chat. So if you can see like the Visual Studio.NET started in 2002, like we had it like we initially we had framework 1.0, and later on it developed with different frameworks versions releases. Okay, and also like every subsequent of .NET framework and subsequent Visual Studio versions, like we have the C Sharp versions as well. So Visual Studio 2013 till from 2003 to 2015, like we had .NET Frameworks 4.6 till then. Later from Visual Studio 2017, like we had .NET Core introduction with respect to .NET Core 1.0, and 7.0 was a C Sharp version that we have used. So later then Visual Studio 2019 followed with the 4.8, the latest version, and 3.1 as the .NET Core framework as well, and .NET Standard 2.1 as the latest standards. I will go through the demo in terms of the .NET standards today with respect to our previous discussions, and with respect to the C Sharp, like 9.7 was the latest versions in terms of 2019. Okay, and 2022, like we are introduced, we have no further release of .NET framework, but only the last framework was 4.8. Like we are going to have the framework with respect to the compatibility with respect to the development of .NET framework and .NET Core also. Okay, the latest version is .NET 8.0. Okay, I missed over here, like it is you will be having .NET 8.0, which is our course content. Okay, .NET 8.0. Okay, 2022 4.8 as .NET framework and .NET Core as 8.0, and .NET standard latest version was 2.1. Okay, Sharp latest version with respect to the C Sharp was 10.0. Okay, so here, if you can see, like it has different versions. Each and every versions has included with specific features. Okay, the basic features we started with 1.0 is the objective oriented, which was very powerful. So having classes, methods, and in like interfaces, and encapsulation, polymorphism, and this made the C Sharp so powerful. Okay, so later from 2.0 we had generics, which were handling with respect to the having runtime handling of the data types at the runtime. Okay, and link you in 3.0, which was very powerful with respect to working with the databases as well. Okay, 4.0 we came across the dynamic typing, and with dynamic names and the optional arguments as well. So 5.0 was a major release in terms of async and await. This the task parallel libraries has come into features, and like more with respect to friendly with multi-threading as well. Okay, and latest like subsequent each added with respect to some sort of new features added in that. Okay, and majorly like in this particular course content will go across all the features in terms of 10.0. So like the records in 9.0, int properties, initiate own properties, pattern matching, global using directories and file scope namespaces as well. Okay, So 11.0, you can ignore it now. It is yet to be expected to be released. So our course content is like 10.0. Okay. Let me connect to my tab and explain you on the .NET evolution. Uh, Yeah, we got connect. So in this particular thing, I am going to let you know on the .NET Core, .NET evolution. Okay. So in once you install Visual Studio 2022, so this 2022 is compatible with respect to .NET Framework and .NET Core. Okay, .NET Core and .NET Framework. In .NET Framework 8.0 is the latest version. Okay, our course contents will be targeting on the 8.0 as well. Okay, in .NET Framework 4.8 is the latest version. Okay, if I wanted to develop the piece of code that is usable across multiple platforms, then I will be using class libraries. So if I create a particular class library in .NET Core, I call it as .NET Core class library. And if I develop a particular piece of code that is reusable and is used across multiple platforms, then that I call that particular class library as .NET Framework class library. What you I hope you understand, like class library is, for example, like it is a piece of code used across multiple platforms to avoid rewriting of code and reusability. Okay. So, for example, like let's say in my particular web application or Windows application, like I wanted to have some sort of logging functionality, or I wanted to have this particular functionality of converting a particular rupee to USD or USD to INR. So I wanted to have some logging functionality throughout the applications. Like once I develop this a piece of code, I wanted to use this particular piece of code across multiple platforms. But multiple platforms can be your .NET application, .NET Core, or .NET Framework. So in that particular thing, I will call this as the class library. Okay. Example, logging exceptions. So this library, logging exception library, can be used across multiple whether it could be a Windows application or web application or whatever. Okay, it will avoid the rewriting of code, right? It will have the function it will have the feature of having the reusability. Okay, logging functionality or currency converter, or you can call something like send email. Like send email is a common functionality across multiple, like whether it could be a Windows application or web or sometimes. Okay, so whichever thing, like you wanted to have this common code that has to be used multiple across, then I will be using class library. So sometimes once you develop a class library in .NET Core or in .NET Framework, so that might be not compatible with respect to the .NET frameworks, with respect to the lower version. Sometimes, like whatever the class library that you have developed in .NET Core may not be compatible with respect to the .NET Framework applications. Okay, nothing but whatever the .NET Framework that I have, .NET Core class library that I have developed, that might be not used in ASP.NET or ASP.NET MVC or ASP.NET Core MVC. Okay, whatever the class libraries with respect to the developed with respect to the one version or the other version may not be compatible to each other. So I hope you get this point. Whatever the .NET class libraries that we developed in .NET framework may not be compatible with respect to the .NET Core. Okay, and whatever the .NET Core class library will not be compatible with respect to the .NET framework. So in this particular, to avoid this particular issue, like we came across the .NET standards. Okay, so .NET standards. So .NET standards, once you develop, once you create a particular class library in .NET standards, it is shared across multiple platforms and multiple frameworks. Okay, so this .NET standards can be shared across in your ASP.NET MVC and in Core MVC or in ASP.NET also. So in any of the frameworks, it can be used, and it can be used in the cloud also. It is user friendly to the cloud. Even your cloud applications can also use this library. So in whichever the application, like it can be used, and it has this particular fixing of the version compatibility issues, all the stuff. Okay, the .NET framework latest standards, latest version is 2.1. Okay, so I hope you get you the 3 points here. One point is .NET Core 8.0 is our latest version, and with respect to the .NET Framework 4.8 is the latest version, and the latest version with respect to the .NET standards is 2.1. Okay, and C Sharp is 10.0. So if you wanted to write something like this, Visual Studio 2022 is equal to .NET Core 8.0 plus .NET Framework 4.8 plus .NET Standards 2.1 plus C Sharp 10.0. Okay. I hope you get this particular point. Which versions we have developed, like earlier, like with respect, we have cleared with respect to the terminologies that we have, and we have came across now that we are into the versions, like we're developing .NET Core 8.0 applications, and in .NET Framework we have 4.8, and what is .NET Standards also you came across now, and C Sharp 10.0 is our latest version. Okay, now let me connect to my Visual Studio. I'll connect to my Visual Studio, and I'll show you a demo. Like I'll develop a .NET standards. We will see the options. We will see the options to create a .NET Core class library and a .NET Framework class library, and also the .NET standards. Okay, so we'll do this, all these three options in Visual Studio. How what which option what options we have in Visual Studio to develop these three. Okay. So once you open the Visual Studio, so you have an option to create a new project. So click on the new project. So you have all the project types filter over here. Just you can go for library. So you have several options with respect to creating the class libraries, like the class libraries that you can create on the .NET Core or .NET Standards. Razor class libraries, WPF custom control libraries, and also you have the class library for .NET Framework. Okay, so we can create the, when I select this one for the .NET, I can create a class library for in the .NET Core, and I can also create the .NET Standards. Okay, so when I select this one, like for the class library .NET Framework, I should be able to create a class library in the .NET Core. Okay, so now let's get started. So I'm going to select this class library, and I'm just clicking on next. I'm giving this particular name as standard class library, class standard library. Okay, and I'm selecting this one. I selected folder, and I'm click select next. So if you select .NET 6.0 or 8.0, nothing but you're creating a class library targeting the .NET Core. So if you select .NET 2 2.0 or 2.1. Nothing but you're creating a .NET standard which is compatible with respect to the .NET Core and .NET Framework. Nothing but if you can refer the image. So you have three here, right? So one is to create the .NET Core class library. So one is to create the .NET Framework class library, and here .NET Standard. So if I select here .NET Frameworks, .NET Core, so 8.0 or something, nothing 8.0 or 6.0, nothing but you're creating a .NET Core class library. So we are going to create a .NET Standard which is compatible to .NET Core and .NET Framework. So I will go and select .NET Standards. Okay, so I'm going to do 2.0, which is very compatible, user friendly with respect to .NET Core and .NET Framework. Okay, okay, I'm giving this name as currency converter. I will declare a variable double. So I'll give this particular variable name as exchange rate, US exchange. Okay, so let it be like 80.2. So I'll write a method like public, which has a double as the return type, double convert INR to USD. Okay, this will take a parameter double some value. Okay, I will calculate this particular thing as something like a return US exchange rate multiplied with value. Okay, so here is a simple class library which has a currency converter, and it will convert this. It will have this particular method convert to INR to USD. Okay, let me give me some naming convention better one. Okay, so it will convert this INR value to USD. So it will multiply with the US exchange rate, and it will return this value. Okay, so let me rename this particular class name as well here in the solution file, and I'm going to build this library. Okay, now that you have created a .NET standard, like which is like compatible with respect to .NET Core and .NET Framework. So we'll create a .NET Core class, some console application with .NET Core and .NET Framework, and we'll try to access this particular class library and check the compatibility. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project. So I'm going to select filter with respect to console. Where is console here? Yeah. Okay. So this is going to create the core console application. So I'm going to select this core console core app, which is having 8.0 framework. Okay. You can go for the 8.0. So as I said earlier, you do not have this particular public static void main and the startup main method. Like this is going to be your startup directly. Okay. So I'm just adding reference to this one. Okay. Using standard library. So I'm using that particular library in my .NET Core application. Okay. So let me create the instance to that particular class. I have the currency converter, right? So obj currency dot convert dot ir. Let's say I wanted to give something like one. Okay. So I wanted to capture the result. I wanted to display in the console. So I'm going to display. Okay. So you can run this and you can see the output. Let's say hello world, or this is from the .NET Core application. Okay. Let me change the startup project. See now that your .NET Core application is able to access your .NET standard, and you can standard library, and it can give the result as well. Okay. Now that we'll create a .NET framework application. So I am going to select the console app for .NET framework. Okay. Framework app. Okay. I'm going to name this as console framework app. Okay. I'm going to take the same code here. You can go ahead and add the reference to this particular library. Okay. I did add it correctly. Okay. Yes, got it. So instead of console dot, we'll go with the framework. Hello, framework word. So now that you should be able to get the result for this one as well. So change the startup class and run this. See, hello world, framework world, and you got the result. So now that you have created a standard library, .NET standard library, which is accessible from the .NET Core and .NET Framework. Okay, so that is what the usage of this particular .NET standards, like it is well much accessible across the multiple frameworks. Okay, so now that you have idea on, let me recap on this particular session. Okay, so now that you have seen the earlier versions, how that .NET evolution in terms of .NET 2003 to 2022. Okay, so now that we have the .NET standards as well. Okay, so we have different features in terms of different versions of C Sharp, and we have roughly had gone through these particular features, and we'll explore more into the further sessions as well. Okay. So next session we'll start with the next. We'll go ahead with respect to the C Sharp fundamentals. Like we understand now the terminologies and the evolution in the .NET framework. We understand the .NET Core and .NET framework and everything stuff. Now that we'll get into more drive with respect to the C Sharp. Okay, so we'll get started with the C Sharp data types, memory management, and common type systems, and common language system, common language specification in the next session. Okay, let's get started. Thanks for watching. Thank you.